Cool deal. So, all right, everyone, welcome to week 4. This present time, like we're going to start thinking about things more in the sense of how we can use Python libraries to read from files, start to use it to scan different file systems, and how we can use that to the best of our ability within our Cypher capabilities. So, moving on, what we're going to do is we're going to actually go through a little bit of the lecture, kind of start talking a little bit about how we can use that within a cyber sense, and just kind of like, I'll kind of hypothesize it or synthesize it on the sense of the defense and the offense a little bit, and then we'll look at that, pull up some IDE stuff for a little bit, and then have you guys on your merry way. So, as always, for those of you that are in class today, if you have a question, feel free to ask as it comes up. If you have any questions that aren't, pertaining to that portion at that moment, save that for after the class, and then of course, if you are sitting here listening, watching this lecture because you can make the class, no worries. As I had mentioned, this is not you're not obligated to be here. This is just for your viewing if you need it. But of course, as always, feel free to reach out on the Discord to get a hold of me. Always the first line of defense to get a hold of me. And if something happens, just feel free to email me. I know a couple folks have emailed me. And again, just a thank you again to everyone. I was getting sick and had to do a quick work trip. I know my emails or my response times have been not what I usually hold the bar to. It's just an unfortunate circumstance that just happened at the beginning of the semester. But I promise it's not like that, and we'll have the rest of the semester to do everything. And as I'd also mentioned, for those of you that are here, whether you didn't hear me say it or if you're viewing this now, all of the week 3 assignments, don't worry. Like if you need to turn those in again, just let me know. Hit me up on Discord. And we'll be good. So that being said, we're going to go ahead and get going. Not going to really worry about the walkthrough for the week 3 script. I'll make that available after class today. Take a look at it if you want. Take a look at the solution, and then if you want, discuss it in Discord. That's fine. But yeah, we're not really going to worry about it too much tonight. Just go take a look at it and make sure that you hang out if you have any questions. All right, so actually going to make this just a tad bit smaller for my eyeballs. So third parties, right? So as we know, Python has a lot of libraries built within it. These libraries have essentially what you can think of as like pre-compiled code within them. What does that mean? That means that you can import new functions. And as we talked about it, a function, all that is it's lines of code that are already predetermined, and you can call them by calling it whatever the function is called. As you've already seen, we've kind of already been doing that a little bit with making you can make your own functions, right? But like with libraries, you can actually already use predetermined ones, which makes it really nice. And that's what makes Python so powerful and versatile. So as it says here, right, like this includes virtually any area of processing that you can think of. I like how the slide, not my slide deck, but the author of it says, I know that may sound like an outrageous statement, and I should probably say an outrageous statement, right? That sounds crazy. How is it that a library could like make it do whatever you want, right? And I mean, that's really the purpose of Python. Is it's not supposed to be this really deep programming language where you can like really, really mimic a lot of different things at a low level, kind of like C. It's really just meant to be an extension and allow you to do different things. So if you want to go look at them, you can just go, if you want to find different ones, you can go to the Python website and you can see all like the different projects, what people are working on. There's a lot of different ones out there. I'm not the author of this, so Pretty Table is a good one though, and we'll get familiar with this one quite a bit throughout the semester. For those of you that haven't used it, what Pretty Table does is it allows you to take data, ingest it, and then output it in a format that actually looks presentable. hence why it's called pre-table, right? Think about it in the sense of where you can take in a bunch of data, a bunch of different random information. You can then write you can write code that will allow you to take whatever it is, sort it out, organize it however you want. And instead of just printing it out in the terminal to make it just look, like it's in the terminal, you can actually have it to where it comes out in a nice, very sleek, I almost want to say it looks like a word table. Right? So for those, I mean, we're all students, right? And so we know how we have to make word tables and things. So Pretty Table just does just that. It takes your Python code, outputs it into something that's, nice looking. So to install it, right, you go and you do pip install Pretty Table, or if you're using Python 3, pip 3. Okay. It mentions here, this is literally just what I just said, right? It's going to be essentially taking it out and printing it in to something that looks nice. Okay, and then Pello, as I didn't mention, it's excuse me. Pello is essentially just another one. It's the best way to it is an image library, so it allows for things again to look a little bit prettier. So as you can see here, right, we already have the Win IDE up here. And as you guys know, and we've already talked about it, I don't use Win IDE. I'm not using a Windows system. I'm actually working out of Mac and then also Linux. So I just use Terminal or PyCharm, sorry. As you can see here, let's at least walk through it, right? And then I would highly recommend for those of you that are using Win IDE, for this course, if that's the IDE that you want to use, make sure that I would say follow along and do that and go through the exercise or go through the snippet, right? So creates a Pretty Table heading 3 columns, file type, name, file type, and camera name. Okay, and then now add a few rows to your table using static data and display the contents of what you're doing. So you're going to declare new variable. And you're going to pass Pretty Table. Remember, it's a function. It's a built-in function. It already knows what to do. You don't have to worry about the parameters. It already knows what it's doing. So from here, right, we have my table. That is the variable we're declaring now. Okay, and we have Pretty Table, and we're calling this function, and then we're giving it a list. And we have file name, file type, camera model. Okay, it automatically knows to create that into the column, and then we're going to add another row. It's automatically going to know to go 1, 2, 3 and add those blocks. So then what you're going to do is you're going to do my table and then use add row. So in this case, you're going to be appending that as the method, and then picture, JPEG, iPhone. Okay. So when you think about something like that, you can then say, okay, well, I want to add more to these rows, and we can, if you want to, you can do it through, if you wanted to only add it to certain rows, you could do it like that, and so on and so forth, right? And so from there, you have that. And then my table is still my table, right? You just added it. So now you do print my table get string, because what it's doing is it's pulling that information. Okay, so that's something important to know. If you want to try to experiment with it, you could try it with just saying print my table, see what it gives you. Maybe it'll give you something different. I'm saying that as in try it, right? Your security students, computer science students, see what it does for you. Now you can talk about adding more rows, adding more rows, right? Try adding a few more, a couple more, see what happens. What is it going to do? All right, so with Pello, right, you can open up an image. So again, here we're declaring the variable pill image, and then you're opening up a JPEG. You're going to do it. You're going to exfiltrate data from it, and it's not telling you what it's going to pick. So it's just giving you different options of what you can do with it. So let's see if it's not actually going to show it. All right. So I guess one of the assignments for this week, and I forgot to mention that, was that you're going to be taking pillow and ingesting and exfiltrating data from those images. And I guess that's it for that lecture. I knew the lecture slides were, I saw that it was small and went through it, but all right. So with that being said, let's go ahead and I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second. All right, so here's the solution, which is now it's up in D2L. I know I mentioned too we wouldn't, but my VM was giving me a little bit of a headache, so while that's coming up, we're going to go ahead and go through this. So with this, one of the questions that was asked was, is this supposed to go through a file or a directory? Okay, so what you're supposed to do is demonstrate the use of a new class, right? So we're going and being able to read through a file path. So if you look, because we're going to be using, like one of the big things is using the OS library, which allows you to interact with the operating system. The big thing that you want to do is you want to prompt the user for a directory path, right? So you're not, so therefore you're going to, like, let's say that you have something you're trying to find a script that it may be running bash. So you go and it says, okay, what file directory do you want to look at? You want to look in bin bash. Okay, then you go /bin/bash. Okay. Using the directory list method, extract file names from the directory path. So you want to look for those file directories, okay? And then you're going to loop through each file name to see what you can find out of it, okay? You're going to want to be able to print out information of it, right? And this one, what's interesting is this assignment is actually probably one of the more difficult ones. It's one of the bigger ones. So prompt the user, here it is, okay. You're going to want to look to see which directory you're going to want to look at, or it's going to then go and see if it's going to go and see if that directory exists. If it doesn't, it's going to go away, and it's essentially going to go through your entire file system, right? So essentially what it's doing is when you say look in bin or /bin/bash, it's going to say, okay, well, where is it? And it's going to go through everything. And if it doesn't find it, it's going to say no, else it's going to go and it's going to look for files that are listed in that directory. Okay. And then if we look here for possible files in that file list, then going to convert those and see what you can find there. And only process files that you have rights to read. So in this case, Ryan, what you're asking is, like, again, this is the question, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that if you're trying to, it's scanning a directory, but it's looking to parse files, right? If that makes sense. So it's scanning out for directories that you're telling it to go look at, but then it's also saying, okay, well, let me go find this directory or directories, and then let me look for the files that I need to look for. So it's a bit of column A and a bit of column B, right? Because it has to by default scan those directories to find those files. Does that answer your question? If it doesn't, I can.
Right. Yeah. I'll go over it and fine tooth comb it, but I was just wondering if it was like, because last semester when we were doing Python, we had to walk each individual directory, and then it would spit out files for each one of those as well, which is what I was wondering.
Gotcha. Were you in my class? Because I taught another Python class last semester.
I was.
Okay. Sorry. Not saying you were forgettable. Lots of students.
No, it's okay.
But yeah, so I mean, and this is kind of like, this is going and being more niche in it, right? Then so like with what you're saying, right? You're looking at it from like a beginner level. It's like, okay, just spit out everything. I want to look at everything in this directory. This is now saying, okay, spit out everything, but don't spit out everything to me. Actually go and look for what I'm trying to tell you to look for. So that's what this is doing. Francisco or Stephanie, do you have any questions about that? Again, that's from last week's assignment.
No, I'm good. I think I got it.
So if we think about with using pretty tables, right? You can go My table, oops, well, I should probably get in Python. I'm going to use Python 3 because I'm pretty sure pre-table is imported in here. So from pre-table import pre-table, that should work. So, okay, cool. It's going to work with Python 3. So that's what it works. So we'll go my table, okay, and equals pre-table. And then we'll put some files in there. So let's put first name. And then last name. And you can put age. And then you can go, we do append it with add row. And then we'll put John, Helmus. Anybody know how old I am? I was teaching a cyber class the other day and we were doing OSINT and a bunch of students were doing OSINT on me. Found out how old I was. Found out a lot of information I didn't think they would know. We'll put 104. That sounds about right. We need to put that in a list. And then we'll do, let's see what happens. Remember how I said print my table? Let's see what happens if we just do print my table. And there you go, right? And so if you wanted to add more, let's say we wanted to add something else. We can put 5. It's not going to allow you to do that, does anybody? And the reason why is because it doesn't think that there's a value there, okay? So it's not going to be able to add it, right? You would have to add another one to it. And you can put ages. Now we should be able to. There you go. So now you can, and what you can do is you can keep taking all this data and printing it out if you want, okay? So it's pretty cool. I mean, I know it's nothing like super fancy, but the thing is that what we can do with this in like an offensive, or let's start on the defensive side, is that if you need to take data from a file and ingest it and then display it in a way that makes it easier for you to analyze it, this is a lot better. This is also a lot better if you're like trying to show it to someone who maybe they're not technologically savvy. It just makes it a lot easier for them to read. You know, it's just a way of how to present something a little better. I know I've used it in presentations that I've given conferences and also in other classes. It just makes it a lot better to read. So you can, you can add a few more rows, see what happens. You're gonna just keep adding and adding and adding, okay? On an offensive security side, something that you would want to do is a lot of times with offensive security tooling, we are actively doing something to exploit something or to gather information from it, kind of like in the same sense with the defense, right? Only we're not doing like super crazy analysis like that. It's more in the sense of, oh, we know what our tools need to do, but at the same time, especially like if you're a consultant, for those of you that want to go be like cybersecurity consultants, if you can have a tool that writes things out in pretty tables, it's going to look a lot better because it's going to, if you take a screenshot of something that you're doing and you print it out in a pretty table, someone's going to be able to look at that and be like, oh, I can actually read that data a lot better. And there are certain tools that you can use to ingest scanning outputs, like Nmap, very popular scanning tool. There's another tool out there called Ultimate Nmap Parser, and that's a tool that actually does use something similar to pretty tables, or I think there's a version of it that actually does use pretty tables, where it will take a Nmap file and completely parse it out. And you can do this where you can actually wrap it with Nmap, and it will take all that data from Nmap. Like, let's say you're scanning like 500 hosts and you don't want to parse through all that output. it'll take all that, put it into a fancy little file that will then also print out a lot of things in a pretty table. And it just makes it a lot easier to read, especially when you're trying to go through stuff and you're not trying to look at every single little bit of detail. You just need things at a higher level. So this really, really helps out with that. So, questions on the pretty table? No worries. So, oops. So if we think about in the sense of how, you would want to set up, that pretty table, okay? With the assignment this week, we look at it. Bring that up really quick. Put up. So if we look at this week's assignment, okay, it says utilizing the Python image library, right? You can use that. And then also you're going to want to be using pretty tables, extract test data from an image, right? You want to be able to prompt, oops, want to do that. You want to prompt the user for a directory path, okay? You want to verify the path provides an easy way to get to the directory, kind of like what we just talked about a minute ago. And you want to generate a pretty table out of it. So you want to have it to where it does something like this, okay? And then just print out your script. So if you think about it, right, we just saw how you create a pretty table. And last week you looked at how you ingest data, right? So you can kind of already think how you can take that and then also use your pretty table to essentially make it look better. That's not the right one. Okay, there we go. Sorry. So take that data and push it out so that you can actually read it. You'll have there's obviously a couple. This is looking at it from mine, but you'll have. Where is it? I don't have it for this week. I guess they didn't have it for this week, but you essentially will take kind of like what we were talking about just a minute ago from the other week's script, and essentially you're just going to go through a loop, kind of like what you did before, and you're going to extract data from that. And now the only thing that you're really doing differently is you're going to be taking that data and presenting it out like this. If we go back. So I'm gonna, so that way I kind of help you a little bit with the exercise, but also not like give you all the answers, but gotta try a little bit, right? But we'll do a little bit of pseudocodedness. We'll call it, we'll just call it process.py. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to import OS because you're going to have to work with the OS, right? And then you want to import pill from image. You need to pull things from the image. Import pretty table from pretty table. Remember, if for some reason it's not working, just do a pip install or pip3 install. It should be already installed, but if it's not, that's okay. You're going to want to set up that pretty table. Okay, so you can call it whatever you want. I'll just call a table, and then you would have that data. So remember, you could write out your pretty table like that, and everything that you would have needs to be in quotes and a comma between each other. Okay. So that's essentially going to be the first part, setting up your pretty table. Okay. From there, you're going to have to think about, okay, how are you going to read? What are you going to read through? So you would have to process files. Okay. And therefore, you're going to create your variable, let's call it directory path or dir path. And you're going to want to prompt that user for input. Remember, that's part of the first part of it. Of course, we already know that how we do that. We just prompt the user for input. Okay. And what directory do a scan? Okay. And then you're going to need to make sure that it needs to validate that. Okay, so you'll do if OS equal or if OS path is dir, do dir path. Oops. All right. You want to create a new variable for it to call the files within that. So you can just call it files or file it, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to call it file list. And then what that's going to do is it's going to read from there. Okay. So process the files, what directory you want to scan, you're going to put the directory, and then it's going to say if that dir path is a directory, it's going to turn it into a file list. And then what you want to do is you want to create a loop that's going to go through that and essentially say, okay, well, I'm going to look at this directory and I'm going to go through each file. Okay. So you create a for loop. So for each file in file list, you're going to you want to try things first, right? Because a try is going to say, okay, if it does this, cool. If not, you can go do something else. And you can essentially nest a bunch of things within the try statement. So you can do try. And then from there, you're going to want to essentially start joining files from the directory. So you could just call it local path or local path. Join. And then you want to combine dir path and we call it each file, right? Because we're essentially stating this here now within file list. So you can call this whatever you want, right? You could call it just SDF, but that was just a finger mash. We're going to say each file. And then you want to essentially from there, potentially want to split them because you'll want to split them so that they can be presentable. And then after that, what you'll want to do is you'll want to get the value, right? Because I know part of the assignment is getting the value. You're also going to want to get the size. Okay. I'm not going to worry about writing all that out. That's just a few extra lines of just essentially splitting and getting the size, which that's built within the OS library. And then what you're going to want to do is get the metadata out of each image. Okay. So the next part that you want to do is you would want to also do another try statement. Okay. So we have to try something else out. And then you're going to do with image open, because you're going to open the image. And remember, it's going to take a file and it's probably going to find an image, and then you're going to open it. And we would just say whatever the images is. You would essentially want it to do status equals yes, because this is what this is going to do is if it's successful, it's going to give you details. So you're going to do that. Format equals format. It's going to call that, and then it's going to give you the image type. You want that, which that is mode. Okay. You're also going to want to get the width and the height. Okay. And then if it doesn't grab that, you'll just essentially make an exception that says, oh, it couldn't get that. And it's going to just print out now. And then you're going to print it out. You're going to print out that pretty table, just like we showed you a second ago. So it's just really all together. I know I didn't write it all out, but we just kind of like going through it and synthesizing what is expected there. Like this will get you through 70% of the assignment. Okay. The only other things that you're gonna really need to do is make those exceptions that if it doesn't work, it keeps going or it throws you an error, and then also printing out that pretty table. Okay. And that's just going to be through printing it out just like we did. You may want to use the get string method when you do that, when you do print out pretty table or whatever you declare your pretty table has. You're going to want to make sure that you use the get string method at first, or you don't have to. I'm sorry, you don't have to. I don't know why I said that. You don't have to, but you might have better luck with it. If you're using Python 2, this is using Python 3 and it didn't have to use it. So, but that's essentially talking about the big assignment for this week. It's just using those two libraries. You've already used the OS library, and it's just walking through a file system, grabbing images and printing them out in that pretty table. And the trip there is essentially just making sure that if you do get the image, it prints it out. It prints out the data, right? That's it. And if it doesn't, give it an exception to say, nope, that doesn't work. And then just keep going. And then even then, because of what you have to display for this week, you don't even have to really worry about if it displays an error or not, because you don't need that, right? You're just trying to show the absolute file. So if it doesn't have an exception, that's okay. It shouldn't. So, but you'll have all the stuff that you need is in that week's folder to get to do everything. So you should be good there. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Any questions for those of you that are here? And again, if you're viewing this now, later on in the week, I'm here.
No questions here. That went over everything that I had a question about.
Nice. Awesome.